So thank you, Wang Guan, and thank you for the press call for coming to this fascinating discussion on the issue of democracy. So I will make a short presentation with PowerPoints. Basically, the title is Democracy, China versus United States. As we all know, democracy is controversial in many ways. If you ask Americans whether China democracy, many of them will say, no, it's autocracy. If you ask Chinese, most Chinese today will tell you, America's democracy is moneytocracy. Money determines everything. So whether, given this kind of controversy, we can have a kind of intellectual discussion on the issue of democracy. So I'm thinking of whether we can use a kind of working definition. I would like to quote the famous line from Abraham Lincoln, government of the people, by the people, for the people. And then I try to compare China and the United States item by item to see which democracy is a genuine democracy and which democracy is better. Now, interestingly, we have just received this fascinating result conducted by Dahlia Research concerning the issue of democracy. In the case of China, 13% people surveyed say their government serves a minority. In other words, more than 80% believe their government works for the vast majority of Chinese population. In the United States, 52% say their government serves a minority. Most people, more than half, believe their government serves minority. And then, this is the study by Dr. Zhong Nanshan, very famous in China. He said just a few days ago, if you live in China today, in terms of freedom from contracting the COVID-19 or from the COVID-related deaths, China today is at least 606 times safer and freer from COVID-related deaths, and 1,678 times safer from contracting the disease. This calculation is very simple. If you look at the figure for death toll of the COVID-19, the United States is roughly 170 times of China's in terms of absolute figure. And China's population is 4.2 times that of the United States. So China is more than 600 safer and freer from deaths relating to COVID-19. And then look at this median net household assets. Indeed, 4 decades ago, China was way behind the United States in terms of personal well-being, wealth, etc. But today we can make a very interesting comparison. This is about net household assets. There is 2 colors for the average family level. In that case, the United States is higher than the Chinese. But in the median, the figure is totally different. If you look at the United States, in 2019, it's closer to $100,000 per household at median level. So in Chinese yuan, it's close to 700,000. Now, in the case of China, it's slightly more than double that of the United States. Of course, the figure I used is for urban households. We don't have rural families. So far, we haven't got that figure yet. Hopefully, by next year, we're going to have one, and then we can make convincing. By the way, if you look at the rising living standard in the countryside, it's also rising faster than we expected. And then, of course, this famous PEW surveys, which you can track back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and today. So in that case, 91% Chinese surveyed believe China is on the right track. 41% believe the United States is on the right track. For the UK, 21%. For France, 20%. There must be a lot of violation of human rights in these countries. given so many people are not happy with the direction of the country. So these are figures surveyed, conducted by reputable international institutions. So I'll say with certainty, concerning for the people, the Chinese model, Chinese political system, or Chinese democracy had delivered and done much, much better than the US model. Now, concerning of the people, I just give you one figure, 90% roughly, Chinese civil servants come from ordinary background. And if you look at the remark by Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, he said, United States now of the 1%, by the 1%, for the 1%. As most people agree, it's a country for the rich. Yeah. And then by the people, that's where most controversy occurs. In the Western political discourse today, indeed, multi-party system, universal suffrage, itself would mean, government by people. Yet, from a Chinese point of view, this is, as Eric just mentioned, it's about institutional procedures. It's at best procedural democracies. Procedures and substance may be same, may be very different. So the Chinese approach is always first focus on explore substance, and then procedures will take shape. We have a traditional philosophy since ancient times. It's called the Tao and the Shu. Tao means overall objectives, overall purpose, overall principles that governs Shu, governs procedures. That's also one way why China can carry out reforms, while many so-called liberal democracies cannot, because they're very rigid with procedures. And then, if you look at the substantial democracy, the Chinese approach can be called to ensure good governance for the people. That's very important. So I submitted this thesis a long time ago, I think 15 or 20 years ago. I said we need to have a paradigm shift. Shift from what's called a democracy versus autocracy, and democracy, autocracy as defined by the West and the West only, to good governance versus bad governance. What's substantial democracy? It means to ensure and achieve good governance. That's the primary objective, and China has been doing that, and rather successful. Again, if you look at the same research from Dahlia Research, interesting, it's the issue of so-called democracy deficits. In the case of China, 84% people surveyed think democracy is important. 73% views their country, China, as democracy. So the democracy deficit is 11%. In the United States, 73% think democracy is important, and 49% only view their country as democracy. So democracy deficit is 24%. And this study is done by Dahlia Research, commissioned by actually the ex-Prime Minister of Denmark, Mr. Rasmussen. He's, of course, you all know, quite hostile to Chinese political system. So that result shows a lot about how by the people cannot be really achieved, even in the eyes of most Americans. Then that's even more interesting. It's again a study by PEW. Very few in any public survey think American democracy is a good example for other countries to follow. But this is a study of major countries, about 20 or so. And 51 said US democracy used to be a good example, but has not been in recent years. And slightly surprisingly, 72% of Americans don't think that US is a good model of democracy for other countries. I think just now, as Professor Martin Jacques mentioned, United States must need a lot of courage, as if nothing has happened without this storming of Congress, whatever, Capitol Hill, and things as usual. Actually, even within the United States, many people are thinking of the issues probably with democracy. If this summit were to be held, it seems it will be held, I hope the number one item will be a topic. A few years ago, economists have a cover story. It's called What's Gone Wrong with Democracy, and which quotes me as in Professor张维为claim US democracy is deeply flawed. It always lacks second-rate leaders. Actually, my original remark, it's always produced third-rate leaders. Unfortunately, that happened. And by the people, the Chinese way. I would describe the Chinese Communist Party as a holistic interest party. It differs tremendously from the Western political party. It's, I would call, partial interest parties. China is a civilizational state in the sense that it's an amalgamation of hundreds of states into one over its long history. So since China's first unification in 221 BC, China has been practicing what you may call a unified ruling entity. Otherwise, the country became ungovernable and broke apart. China practiced the American model of democracy after the Republican Revolution in 1911. And then the country degenerated into civil wars and fighting between warlords, each war supported by certain Western powers. So this is indeed a common sense in Chinese political culture, governing a country of amalgamation of hundreds of states into one. You follow this principle, unify the ruling entity. China invented the public civil servant examination system, the Keju system. So today, the way the Chinese elected leaders is a system which I call selection plus election. If you look at the members of the political bureau, especially the standing committee, most of them have already governed over 100 million people before they came to their present positions. The Chinese leadership today is the most competent in the world. In order to carry out reforms, I think you need to have a holistic interest party. Why in so many liberal democracies, there's no way to reform? Whoever makes reforms, whoever steps down. The point is that you need to have overcome vested interests. Only a political institution, political force, which can represent the vast majority, holistic interest of your people, you can push for reform, to overcome reforms. And China is the expert on reform. We are conducting reforms every day, every month, every year. And I think it's time for the West to think hard how to reform its political system. Otherwise, the system will go way down. And also, because you're a holistic institution, you can plan for the future, for next year, next 5 years, next 10 years, next 100 years, for next generation. That's definitely the advantage of Chinese political system. Now, having said of the people, by the people, for the people, now I draw something from Chinese experience, which Abraham Lincoln did not know much about. I call it to the people and with the people. Now, let's discuss to the people. It's mainly about decision-making process. If you compare the quality of decision-making between China and the United States, I would say Chinese decision quality is much better because we practice this democratic centralism, which we borrowed from the Soviet Union, but reinvented according to Chinese practice. I'll give an example, how China makes its 5-year plan. Roughly, it takes 1.5 years in the making. In the process, you have hundreds of rounds of consultations with think tank, with experts, with general public, within the party, outside party. And then if you look at this, what we call whole process democracy, not only you produce the plan, but also you have the review of the implementation of the plan. Many of you are here for many years. We have, for instance, the 2 sessions in March, and then we review the 5-year plan and annual plan. And then at the end of the year, usually in December or November, we have a CPC Central Committee Conference on Economic Affairs. Again, we will review that. And in each and every 2会, Chinese Prime Minister and his work report exactly tell you a to-do list to what extent we finished that, we have not finished that. So it's very earnest. You compare the quality of the work report of Chinese government and the State of Union address of the American presidency. The Chinese quality is much, much higher. Each line and every line relate to people's daily life, and people appreciate that. And for the United States, just now Kishore mentioned this case study by Professor Martin Gillen and Benjamin Page. Basically, the wealthy few move policy, while the average American has little power after their reviewing answers to 1779 survey questions asked between 1981 and 2002. So I think it's a matter of not just electing a leader every 4 years. It is about decision-making process. To what extent your decision reflects the will of the people. So that's to the people. We adopt principle of from the people, to the people, one round. To the people, from the people, another round. So we go several rounds of consultation democracy, then reach mature decision. I always joke with my British friends. I said, why bothering this referendum? It's very old-fashioned. If you compare this with smartphones like 2G, we're now in the age of 5G. We have to really move with changing times. Only 3% some difference, the country divided and became a huge problem. If we adopt a consultative democracy, democratic centralism, I can assure you, with the Chinese model, even 30% difference, we can reach consensus and move the nation forward. Yeah. Lastly, with the people. That's a famous line from Xi Jinping. We should stay forever with the people. That's, we mean it. It's not just words, it's practice. Each party leader, political bureau member, has what's called contact points with different parts of the country, provinces. The end of the day is we have to ensure balance between political power, social power, and power and capital, power of the capital, to ensure that this balance of the three powers will be in favor of the vast majority of the population. Otherwise, the system will be in trouble. From my point of view, in the United States, it is a balance of the three powers in favor of the super rich. I've got one line to say difference between Chinese political system and American political system. The Chinese system is very clear. The richest 100 individuals cannot dictate political bureau. In the United States, the 100 rich individuals most likely can dictate White House, or even less than 100 individuals. As a result, you have all the problems, So I think the United States system needs serious reforms. I'm thinking of this example, I really feel deeply upset. United States spent $2.3 trillion on the Afghan war. It's killing, destruction, gross violation of human rights. $2.3 trillion in the past 20 years. In the case of China, since General Secretary Xi Jinping came to power, we eradicated the last batch of poverty, extreme poverty, closer to 100 million people. We spend it should be $250 billion. We complete this task of ending poverty. Why the United States could not spend this $2.3 trillion on ending the poverty in the United States? Indeed, with this money, again, in theory, a hypothesis, with the Chinese model adapted to different situations, we can wipe out global poverty, in theory at least. But this money, huge amount spent on war, on destruction, on killing, on violation of human rights. Why so? When interpretation, which many people have, it is, everyone knows actually, the media should expose that, the interest, vast interest of the military-industrial complex, as already mentioned in the 1950s by President Eisenhower. So the enemy of the United States is not Russia, not China, but the United States itself. Same with West. This enemy of the West, not China, Russia, other countries, but the West itself. Lastly, my conclusion and a bit of memory. Just now, Wang Guan mentioned my debate with Professor Fukuyama exactly 10 years ago, in June 2011. It almost coincided with this Arab Spring, and Mubarak was toppled. And he said in this debate, China may also have a kind of Arab Spring. And I said, no chance. And I made a forecast. I said, on the contrary, Arab Spring itself will become Arab winter. In the end, it became Arab winter. Most people agree today. And then he said China needs a political reform, need a multi-party system, one person, one vote. I said both China and the United States need the political reforms. The US political model and system needs more reforms, substantial reforms. Why? I said because your system is a product of pre-industrial era. From this process of fighting COVID-19 we saw, there is no clear responsibility, division of labor between the federal government and states government. That's a huge problem for modern society. And then I also said simple-minded populism may eventually prevail in the United States. And Fukuyama was confident it will not happen in American society. And because it's a mature democracy with free media, free press, I said you are slightly a bit naive. Yeah. China has practiced people's democracy. In other words, of the people, by the people, for the people, to the people, with the people, on all 5 fronts. My humble view, the Chinese model and system works better and much better than the American system. It reminds me of the famous tweet when this storming of the Capitol Hill occurred. United States, if the United States saw what has happened on the Capitol Hill, United States will invade the United States to liberate the United States from the tyranny of the United States. Or another tweet, that's the first coup d'etat that took place without the participation of the US Embassy in Americas. Yeah. This kind of tweets will go around in Chinese internet, social media. I'm pretty sure about that. And because indeed, for especially Chinese young generation, American democracy is increasingly a joke. As for Taiwan democracy, it's a greater joke. Yeah. And now, from my study of the political system, actually my debate with Professor Fukuyama, I said this already 10 years ago, that in terms of political system, Chinese vision is already way beyond the American model. Yeah. Maybe I can draw an analogy, which may not be very appropriate. This kind of summit for democracy is a kind of old game. Where the Freedom House will measure, which country is making progress, which country is moving backwards, etc. It's almost like the competition between, in the color film industry, between Fuji and the Kodak in that era. But the Chinese model is more or less for the digital age. So we are really looking beyond, moving beyond. We're not bothered with that. If many countries, people in the world prefer the Western model, Americans prefer the American model, we respect choice, but we do not envy you. Yeah. To be honest, people like us and Eric, we have some sympathy for you. You have to improve, otherwise, without reform, it will be going way down. So it's not the end of history, it's the end of history. That's all the remark I offered to Professor Fukuyama 10 years ago. So my conclusion remains valid. Thank you very much.